topic, and it's going to be really important in this topic that you take notes and that you really listen to the video and hear what I kind of have to say. I am going to try and keep it short and sweet so that you don't feel like you're taking up too much time. So we're going to start with what is demand, and demand is for the consumer. So we're talking about what a consumer wants here, and the consumer is going to be willing to buy a good or service at a certain price because they have the ability to pay for it. And so what this looks like is that as prices fall, quantity demanded will go up, but then as prices increase, the quantity demanded goes down. And those two statements right there are known as the law of demand, basically saying as prices fall, quantity demanded increases, and vice versa. So I've drawn here for you guys a seesaw, just showing that when prices are down, demand is up, and then when prices are up, demand is down. So the first thing that you'll see is a demand schedule, and it's how much of an item an individual is willing to purchase at each price. So at $0, people are willing to buy 16 lattes, but then by the time you get to a $6 latte, only 4 people or 4 lattes are being bought. And so you have to kind of find a happy medium of where can I make money as a producer, but as a consumer, I want to buy it. And so when I talk about demand as a consumer, we're looking at the habits of a consumer. What are they buying and at how much? The table here then goes into a curve. And so you can see that it is a downward sort of sloping curve, and the more quantity, the less of the price. Wow, that struggled there. But you can just see it's a graphical representation, and so the higher the price, the less demand. So now we're going to move into some key things you need to know about demand. The first thing is what's known as the law of diminishing marginal utility. And so I always think of this as eating donuts. If I gave you a box of unlimited donut holes and told you could have as many as you wanted, but you had to record your liking on a scale of 1 to 10, and then you could not have anything to drink or eat besides these donut holes. At some point, the additional donut hole that you are going to eat isn't going to taste as great as that first additional donut hole. So for a while, you're probably going to give donut holes 10 out of 10. They're fantastic, you really enjoy them, and then slowly it's going to decrease until your last donut hole or your last 3 donut holes are a consistent 1 because you're full, because your mouth's dry, because you just don't like the taste of donut holes anymore. And so this goes for a lot of things. If you overbuy or get too much, it just decreases it. The other 2 sort of key concepts you need to know about demand is the income effect and then the substitution effect. And so the income effect is consumers buy things or don't buy things because their income changes. And so this current situation right now is a really great example. A lot of people aren't buying things anymore. Gas, for example, how many people are still driving their cars consistently? And so the demand for gas has significantly decreased. And then substitution effect. Consumers will buy something else because there is a substitute available. All right, we're going to talk about how to use demand, and I'm actually going to skip forward. And so what we're talking about today is the demand curve. And there are some key things you need to know about the demand curve. First, you always need to have a title. The axis always needs to be labeled price, and the axis always needs to be labeled quantity. And then you're going to draw your demand line, and you're going to label it D1. When I go through drawing these demand curves, I highly encourage that you have multiple colors and you keep a consistency. All right, so how do we use demand? Well, there's 2 ways that demand changes. So the first one is when we talk about a change in price, and this is super key. When there's a change in price, you're only changing a movement along the curve. And so when I'm practicing drawing that, I will show it to you guys, but you're only going from point to point. Whereas the stuff we're about to talk about is a shift or a change in demand. So the whole line moves to the left or to the right because of these factors of demand. And so this is what's known as merit. So you have market size, expectations, related prices, income, and taste. And so if you write it out, it spells MERIT. First up is market size, and so this is the numbers of consumers, and it can increase or it can decrease, and typically it increases or decreases due to population shifts. So if there's an increase in population, then there's going to be an increase in demand. If there's a decrease in population, there's going to be a decrease in demand. The next one is expectations, and so your expectations affect your buying habits today because you have expectations for the future. And so if you think the price will change, you decide if you'll buy it now or later. Meaning if you know the price is going to drop in the future, you're going to wait to buy it. Demand decreases. But if you know the price is going to go up in the future, demand increases because you're going to buy it now. And so when we're talking about demand curves, we're talking about the right now based on predictions in the future. All right, related prices. You have complements and you have substitutes. And so complements are goods that are used together. So when demand increases for one, it'll increase the demand for other. Or if there's a decrease in price for one, the demand increases for the other. And so things like CDs and CD players go together. Versus substitutes. So goods and services that can be used in place of each other. One example could be Netflix and movie theaters, right? Where the demand for movie theaters decreases or the price of movie theaters goes up, it's going to cause the demand for Netflix to increase. Income is broken into two groups, normal goods and inferior goods. Normal goods are considered the more expensive things. They're considered things that consumers want when their incomes rise, whereas inferior goods are goods that consumers demand when their income falls. And those are some examples there for you guys to kind of read over and look over. Taste, what's hot today will be tomorrow's cast off. And so a consumer will demand more of a certain good at every price because it's popular. So a product right now that's popular may be like Tiger gear because of Tiger King, and so we're going to see an increase in demand for tiger costumes, and that's going to cause the whole demand curve to move. But 3 weeks from now, Tiger King might not be popular anymore, and so the demand for those costumes is going to decrease. And so the example here is thinking about your own closet. What is there that you haven't worn in a while, and why haven't you worn it? All right, we've talked about this curve. So this is your original demand curve. This is what an increase in demand looks like, and then this is what a decrease in demand looks like. And then the next video is going to be me showing you how to draw this, how to label it, walking you through all of it. But these are some visuals that you definitely want to have written down and in your notes. Think of these as vocab cards. Go ahead and draw them into your notebook so that you have them consistently to refer back to, especially when you're doing some of these practice problems in a little bit. As always, if you have All right, guys, I'm going to talk to you about demand. And so this first step is going to be an increase in demand. The first thing you guys always need to have is you need to have your P's and Q's labeled. So while you're doing that, I'm going to give us a title, and it's going to be increase in demand. And so this is the setup for a complete graph. You've got the title, you've got the axis labeled, price and quantity. You can also always label this just Q or label this one just P. And then you're gonna go ahead and draw your first line. And so we're gonna call this demand 1. So you're gonna draw the line and then you're going to label it D1. Okay, so now that we've labeled D1, we are going to increase it. And so what that means is we are going to shift it to the right. And so we are going to call this increase in demand, which we've already done. And then another way to do it is an increase in demand. And we're going to shift it to the right. And so an increase in demand shifted to the right looks like this. All right, and that line needs to be a little bit thicker. So here is our new line. We're going to call it D2. And so an increase in demand is going to cause a few things to happen, and so I'm going to talk you through it just very quickly. So an increase in demand is always shifted to the right. And how do I know this? Well, if I draw a point on my demand curve and then I draw a straight line to the price axis and the quantity axis, and I label them P1 and Q1, I'm going to increase demand, which is going to cause an increase in quantity demanded. And so that increase is going to be right here. Okay, and this is going to become known as Q2. And then P1 stays the same, so it's P1 and P2. And so an increase in demand increases quantity, and then there's no change in price. So let me know if you have any questions on this, and I hope that makes sense. Decrease in demand. So the first step after drawing the graph is to give it a title, and so we're going to call this decrease in demand. All right, I've given it a title. The next step that we need to do is then draw our first demand line. So we're going to draw our demand line. We're going to label it D1 because we always start off with demand. Then we are going to draw our arrows to decrease demand. Decrease in demand is a shift to the left, and so we're going to label this D2. Okay, so a decrease in demand is a shift to the left. To check yourself, you can always draw a point. I'm going to change the color really quick. You can always draw a point on the lines and check yourself. So this is quantity 1, and this is price 1. And then we're going to draw a decrease in quantity. And so we will see Q2 has gone down, but P1 stays the same, and so it becomes P1 and B2 and P2. So decrease in demand is a decrease in quantity. If you have any questions, let me know. Called a movement. So go ahead and make sure you have your graph. This should be a completely new graph, and then we're going to call it a movement. And so you're going to draw yourself one demand line, and you're going to label it D1. A movement along the curve means that it was just a change in price. And so movement equals change in price. That means is we are going to start with a point on the demand curve, and we are going to label it point A. When there is a change in price, so if price decreases, it is just a movement along the curve, and so we will decrease it. So from A to B equals a change in price as a decrease, whereas when we move from A to C, it becomes an increase in price. So what I mean by this is the price of the good has changed.